All right, it's time for another classic album, and I was kind of racking my brain of which ones I wanted to cover, and I've got a short list of those that I am really excited to talk about. But yeah, for some reason, I just felt like talking about this one. I've been listening to it all this past weekend, so let's just dive into it. I forgot to make a going for the one joke. I could have been like, I decided to go for the one, but oh well, here we are with Going for the One by Yes. So Yes, grandfathers of progressive rock, getting their start in the late 60s, really breaking onto the scene in the early 70s and really kind of redefining and trailblazing what progressive rock music was. Their first two albums were much more of that like Brit wave pop that we would get with just like flares of progressive rock in it. It wasn't until the Yes album came about that they really got their like prominent progressive rock star. Followed up with Fragile, kind of solidifying, in my mind, the best lineup of the band. That continued on with, Close to the Edge, probably one of, if not the best progressive rock album that has ever been recorded. And just went off the deep end with Tales from Topographic Oceans, and you either loved it or you hated it. So yeah, a couple albums after that, Relayered was the one that was in between that. We come to Going for the One. And the one thing that I really, particularly love about this one is the lineup goes back to what it was within Tales of Topographic Oceans. The new drummer, now 3 albums in, with Alan White, that we all know and love. That was the studio and session musician from, the Yoko Ono, the Plastic Ono and John Lennon band, helping out as well with a lot of other Beatles individuals, with George Harrison. For a little bit there, Rick Wakeman, the main keyboardist, had stepped away from the band, especially after the lukewarm reception of Tales. He was replaced by Patrick Moraz when Relayered came out, and he definitely added an interesting dynamic to the band. But Rick Wakeman is back with the other key performers of John Anderson on lead vocals, Steve Howe on lead guitars, Chris Squire on backing vocals and bass, and that's the boys. That's the boys. And the thing that I really particularly love about this is how present Rick Wakeman is, especially within that organ sound. I believe the boys went to either the Netherlands or Switzerland or somewhere in the Northern Europe countries and locations, and basically just spent a whack of like a whole bunch of months just writing music. And we've got 5 main tracks off of this album that infuse a lot of that more chill, a lot more mellow music, because Relayered was a very complex, very dense album. And I feel like even though this album is a lot more symphonic in its approach, a lot more bigger in sound, it doesn't quite have that same level of sophisticated complexity that Relayered has. It's a little bit more of an album for the everyday man. And you can definitely hear this within the title track, the opening track of Going for the One, which is a lot more optimistic. It's a lot more joyful. You have Steve Howe with this twangy style of guitar starting this all off, and it's a lot more poppy in approach. It's a little bit more self-contained track in that sense, that opens the album out pretty well. It's fun, it's bouncy, it's very boppin', which I particularly like, and they haven't really done a track like this probably since the Yes album. There were definitely moments and times on Fragile that were flirting with tracks similar to this, but they weren't going in with the idea of making this big prog movement or item on this one. It was just fun music, and you're definitely seeing that with the title track. Then we go into Turn of the Century, one of my favorite tracks from Yes, that really does blend and sequence both the best aspects of Rick Wakeman as well as Steve Howe. Like, these two individuals basically smattered together and provided about 8 minutes of pure delight. And what I love is that the first half of this track is a very traditional, almost pop ballad at the time. Like 1977 was definitely starting to shy away of the progressive rock movement and kind of embrace a little bit more of sincerity, a little bit more of heartfelt instrumentals. And we're definitely found this on turn of the century, especially in the latter half, where it's that instrumental build. It's Rick Wakeman providing the foundation for Steve Howe to play on top of, and the two build this track into something so very beautiful. Like every time I listen to this, I almost choreograph this whole dance in my head where two individuals meet on the street and then they envision themselves dancing in this ballroom and being lifted off into the stars and dancing on the clouds and being brought back down to earth. It was so beautiful and so heartwarming and like heart-wrenching at times to know about these individuals and their dance. Then we come to probably the weakest track off this one in my mind, which is a shame because this is the main track that Chris Squire provides, and that's Parallels. And I'm not saying that this is the bad track. I'm just saying this is my least favorite track off this album. I do love how big and meaty those organs are on this one. I love how lush and grand and large that sound is that really permeates the entire track. And again, Chris Squire's bass line on this one just beats you over the head. Love how chunky and how gravitating that is. It pulls you into the track. But I don't know, I just, once we get into the track proper, I'm just kind of left with a little bit of a nothing sandwich in my mouth. Like, it's good, it's great, but I don't know, I'm not all that excited about it. Now, the same can't be said about the last two tracks, the second side, starting off with Wondrous Stories and Awaken. Wondrous Stories is, once again, it's probably one of the more short tracks that the band has done, but man, what they're able to do in that short time, it's just so beautiful and so haunting. I love how it opens up, very soft, very whimsical. It's very much so a John Anderson track, and it's like watching the clouds go by. It's very chill. It's very mellow. I love how it's almost like this warm hug from John as he's singing away, talking about these wondrous stories. As it slowly opens itself up, Rick Wakeman is able to tinkle on the ivories, and he provides just that great dancing lights as it brings itself through. You can definitely tell like the band is giving Rick a lot of space to play over this, and a lot of space even within this shorter track of about 3+ minutes, almost 4 minutes long. But then we come to the big heavy hitter, the one that I think everybody can agree is like the staple track for this one, Awaken. Love this track. Holy geez, even though they were shying away from the progressive rock movement, they could still prog, they could still prog hard with Awaken on this one. Love how the beginning is so bombastic and so powerful and so meaty. I feel as though, Steve Howe and Rick Wakeman are battling one another with how fast the other can play and how complex they can make their arrangements and movements on this one. Love how it all crescends into, is that even a word? Sure, it's a word. Crescends into this big, ball of brilliance by the midpoint, and it's got this first real resolution within the music, something that, yes, is so very well done at. Like, they can master this, and they have within Awaken. And that's only the first half. Then the song kind of, I don't want to say falls apart, but I will say it dissipates into the second half, where it takes its time, really does take its time to build itself back up. And we just have this really small arrangement, I know when they play this live, John Anderson plays a small harp to help build this self back up. Rick Wakeman on the piano, again, just provides a movement that slowly builds itself back up, It doesn't reach that same kind of chaotic resolution that we have in the first half, but man, it's like climbing this hill by the time we get to that peak, and we are rewarded so heavily with a number of plateaus and a number of crescendos at the end of this. And I love that final crescendo that really has never been replicated in a live setting, because they do play this song quite regularly live, but I always feel when we get that wind up and punch within that final crescendo moment, I feel as though instead of playing with this really deep and endless bottom within the organ sounds, like that big, almost foot pedals organ, that boom, boom, it's instead copped out with a much more heavenly sound on the mellotrons, which are needed, but I feel as though those heavenly sounds on the mellotron come in with the second movement. So we have this big, meaty style on the organ with that really big bass and that really high sounds on the top hat on there, and those blending coming together for that first punch that has that boom, boom, And then the second movement, that's when you lay on the mellotrons. That's when you lay on those heavenly like chorus works. And they did it so perfectly on the studio. I always wondered why they never replicated it in a live setting. And I've been told that's because Rick Wakeman always wanted it just to have the mellotrons rather than the big organ sound. But I'm so glad that they put it on the big organ sound because I love that. I love the big, meaty sounds in that. It really does fill up the space in that sense. So yeah, holy jeez, I friggin' love this album. It's one of my absolute favorite Yes albums. And in my mind, this is the album that really does cap off the brilliant albums that we got from Yes within the 70s. Basically starting from the Yes album, going all the way through to Going for the One. Nothing against Tornadoes and Drama. Those are still two good albums, but I just feel like after Going for the One, they really did leave their more proggy, bigger style of music to the wayside and embraced a little bit more on the accessible, poppy outlook that we would get from the late 70s, early 80s. So yeah, Going for the One, absolute masterpiece. It's a staple within the late 70s prog works. It did kind of go to show that prog could survive in the late 70s, even though so many bands were kind of leaving it at the wayside and not giving it too much credence. But yeah, I love this album. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. One of my absolute favorites within the Yes discography. So there you go. There you go. Those are my thoughts on Yes Going for the One. What do you guys think about this album? Do you love it? Do you hate it? How does it stack up with the Yes discography in your mind? Let me know all about your thoughts about this album by commenting down below. And yeah, there's another classic albums in the bag. I hope you guys have been enjoying this. I'm going to continue on every Thursday reviewing another classic album as long as I can. Maybe I'll continue it until, October or September, or we're in September, November, or maybe I'll just, peace out at any time. I'm reserving that right. I am not holding myself steadfast to this deadline. So there you go. Hope you guys have enjoyed that one. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.